In the wake of the Klitschko-Pulev fight, I wanted to analyse some future opponents for Vladimir and say which heavyweights I give a fighting chance of beating Klitschko and which heavyweights I think shouldn't waste their time. Let me start by ruling a few guys out who I don't think have what it takes to beat Vladimir. Number 1, Shannon Briggs. Entertaining, good talker, good draw, but we saw what happened when he fought the other brother. He's now a few years older. Surely his time is gone. Marco Huck, a guy who's still young and a guy whose heart I think is in the right place in terms of his determination. But for me, it's going to be very, very difficult for him to beat Klitschko. Look at the fight with Povetkin. Close, I know, but Povetkin won it. And I think for a guy like Marco Huck, who's got some defensive and technical frailties, he would be exposed by Klitschko and I think stopped. Ksar Glazkov, I think would lose the fight against Klitschko for similar reasons to why Pulev lost it. Like Pulev, Glazkov is a fighter who is extremely reliant on his jab, and that's just not good enough against Vladimir Klitschko, because it's all very well and good having a great jab when you're fighting a lower level of opposition, but when all you bring to the table is a jab and you're facing the best jabber on the planet, you're in big, big problems. Let me also say I think Glazkov has had problems with movers, athletes in the past. Look at Malik Scott. I scored Scott that fight. I don't really think he's ready for an athlete and a jabber like Vladimir Klitschko. Too small, too reliant on the jab. For the same reason, the Kubrat-Pulev rematch not happening. The guy doesn't have the versatility, the movement, the other facets to his game. He's a very good jabber, just not as good as Klitschko. So there are 4 names I've ruled out instantly. Glazkov, Pulev, Briggs, Hook. I'd also rule out Carlos Takam and Alexander Povetkin. Both of them very, very good, solid fighters. But we saw what happened in the first Povetkin matchup. We saw that Takam, when he fought Povetkin as well, had stamina issues towards the end of the fight and became more hittable and was susceptible to being caught. These guys are also, they don't have an electric inside game at the world class level, and they're too small. They're sitting targets for Vladimir with his long game. So I'd rule those guys out. Now, as I've said before, I think there's several types of opponents who have a chance of beating Vladimir Klitschko. Klitschko's main attribute is his jab, his outside game. At times, to me, he looked slightly less comfortable against Pulev than he did against Leopai, Povetkin. And I think the reason behind that was because Pulev is a very tall man who stood upright. And as a result, he wasn't noticeably smaller than Vladimir. I think Vladimir was slightly more cautious because of this. His jab wasn't as dominant as it was against Leopai and Povetkin. So I think, and I know this one's controversial, that Tyson Fury versus Vladimir is at least stylistically interesting. Tyson Fury, a very, very big man, 3 or 4 inches bigger than Klitschko. But a man who can move. A man with decent feet for a big man. If he could stay on the outside and use range against Klitschko, win rounds by throwing a jab and moving and staying out of range of Klitschko's jab, people will cite the example of Steve Cunningham knocking him down. But I think Tyson Fury's best wins, I think his best win is probably the performance he puts in over Kevin Johnson, where he doesn't get sucked into a wall. He boxes, he uses movement, he fights from the outside. I think there's some suggestion that Tyson Fury could at least be competitive against Vladimir. Look at the awkwardness and questions Pulev's size caused. Well, imagine if that was Tyson Fury, not Pulev. Imagine if he could use the reins to throw his jab, but stay out of Vladimir's reach. To use a double jab and throw power punches off the back of it. I think Tyson Fury is certainly an opponent I'd like to see. Klitschko's chin has long been the subject of discussion after earlier stoppage losses in his career. As a result, big punchers, the Stiverne Wilder winner, for example, always have a chance. Kubrat Pulev got dominated last night. But let's not forget, he caught Vladimir with a good jab in the first round. Although it was slightly less obvious, I believe he caught Vladimir with a backhand punch in the 4th round. Had that been Deontay Wilder, landing a right hand, with Klitschko's chin, with Wilder's power, there's always a chance that that could happen and an upset could occur. Now let me say, I don't necessarily rate Deontay Wilder or David Price. I think both guys are too one-dimensional in their reliance on a big right hand. Having said that, the threat they carry with their power always gives you an opportunity to upset the odds at any moment. For me, Kubrat Pulev, Leopai, John Mark Mormek, Pianetta, they're big punchers. They're big punchers at a top 50 heavyweight level. Maybe not John Mark Mormek, but the others. But they're not big punchers at a top 10 level. Pulev wasn't knocking guys out like Tony Thompson, who Vladimir Klitschko was KOing. He wasn't in the same league of puncher. So I think a Tyson Fury or a very big puncher like the Wilder Stiverne winner has a shot. Let me mention a few other fighters briefly who I think are almost at the position where they could challenge. Although I expect Derek Chisora to lose to Tyson Fury, I think a Derek Chisora like we saw in the Edmund Gerber fight has the potential to be competitive. Chisora is good against taller men. He covers up his chin. He comes in with that Joe Frazier style bobbing and weaving movement. He's got effective body punching. He's rough and tough on the inside. I don't think Derek Chisora would allow himself to be held and wrestled like we saw Klitschko do with Pulev and Povetkin. As I say, I expect Chisora to lose. I don't view Chisora as a complete fighter. For me, his movement is one-dimensional. His power isn't there at the elite level. However, Chisora is an almost for me. He's got some attributes that would cause Klitschko problems. Similarly, Bryant Jennings. a guy with mega reach, as I understand it, 3 inches longer reach than Wlad Klitschko. A great athlete, a great physical specimen, a great mover. Now for me, Bryant Jennings also, similarly to Derek Chisora, is not a complete article. Barring a bizarre sort of point being taken off of Mike Perez in their fight, I think Perez was winning that. And it was a very, very close fight. At times, Perez highlighted the lack of amateur background in Bryant Jennings. And I don't think Bryant Jennings is at the level yet where he beats Klitschko. But I think he has certain attributes that could cause Klitschko problems. Using range, using movement. You don't want someone who's just going to stand at that 3/4 range Pulev was at. You don't want someone who's going to be a sitting duck, who looks like they've got their feet stuck in cement. You want someone who can move, who can be an athlete, who can throw back. And whilst Bryant Jennings, for me, doesn't have the amateur background, the technical ability, or the power to win a fight with Klitschko, he's another nearly. Finally, Mike Perez. The big question with Perez is his conditioning. He's also very, very small and very short for a heavyweight. But again, the guy's got attributes. Superb head movement. Superb angles in the ring. He could get low. He could try and come under Klitschko's jab. You know, for me, Chisora doesn't quite have the power, doesn't quite have the footwork. Perez doesn't quite have the power or the size. Jennings doesn't quite have the experience or, again, the power behind him. None of these guys are going to beat Klitschko, but I can at least see these guys causing him problems. And if we look at his last couple of fights, Pianetta, Leopai, Povetkin, Thompson, Pulev, you know, none of these guys have even taken a round off him. You know, not one round. I think a Jennings, a Chisora, a Perez could at least be more competitive. Similarly, Deontay Wilder, David Price. I don't view them as technically capable of beating Klitschko over 12. But there's always scope. Those guys bring a certain X factor to the ring with their right hands. You know at any moment, no matter how badly they're doing in a fight, they can end it. Tyson Fury is the one I like. He's the only one I can see even coming close to outpointing Klitschko. He's got a better inside game than Klitschko. His athleticism isn't as good as Klitschko's, but the guy's got foot movement. He's also got better range than Klitschko. We'll have to see how he performs against Derek Chisora. Romain Stiverne is one I like as well. An athlete, very well schooled in my opinion. Punching power, adequate defence, adequate elusiveness. He'd need to avoid the jab. That's the big worry with him. But what I don't want to see is Marco Huck. What I don't want to see is Glazkov or Briggs or Takam. The guys who are going to cause Klitschko problems are guys who are bigger than Pulev, like Fury, are guys who hit harder than Pulev, like Stiverne and Wilder, or are guys who have an electric inside game, like a slightly advanced Chisora, or of guys who have extreme movement, a better Chisora, a better Bryant Jennings, a better Mike Perez. You know, if one of those three can go out and make a statement in their next fight, But let's be honest, outside of Klitschko, who are the top heavyweights? Povetkin dominated. Pulev dominated. Hay pretty much dominated. For me, the names out there are Fury and the Wilder Stiverne fight. Let's hope those happen. Interested to hear your thoughts on opponents, who stylistically makes the best matchup, and who you'd like to see. Follow me on Twitter @BoxingGossip.